So good afternoon, everyone, and this is 5 o'clock. So welcome to our Governance and Priorities meeting for February 1st. Can you believe that? 31 days has passed and we're finished January, and 1 full month of 2021 is already gone. So time flies when you're having fun. So ladies and gentlemen, there is an agenda. Deputy Mayor, if I can have you make the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council adopt the February 1st, 2021 Governance and Priorities meeting agenda as presented.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And just a little reminder, please make sure your mics are off if you're not speaking, and that your video is off as well, just to save some bandwidth to help people that are remotely logged in. And again, please text me if you want to speak, and that way it allows me to have a cumulative order so that I can see who texted in first and who's going to be speaking first. And as well, the recording secretary will be counting all the votes when I call them, and then she'll lower your hand after that. Okay. So with that, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I can see 6 hands. I'm just waiting for Councillor Bennett.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe Councillor Bennett does not want to vote in favor of the agenda.
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'm just having trouble with my raise hand icon. For some reason, I've got Mr. Ian McKay on my screen and I can't seem to get rid of him, and he's covering up my hand raising. So on my screen it says message Ian McKay, and I can't find any way to get out of that.
Okay, I'm not too sure, so I'm not the techie. Okay, let's verbally take that, and I'll let
yes, please.
Shay and Adam take care of that. Is that a verbal yes?
Yes, verbal yes.
Okay. Thank you. So recording secretary, that's 7 in favor.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Move to number 3 of our agenda items is public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on other things that are not listed on the current agenda today. Town manager, this is a virtual meeting. Has anybody submitted a request to have something read?
Your Worship, we have received no request for public input this evening.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on. We have some presentations today. The first one under 4.1 is the presentation by the Tri-Regional Homeless and Poverty Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to the rest of Council. My name is Sherda Chilag, and I am a Community Development Officer with Stony Plain Family and Community Support Services. I'm pleased to be here tonight to introduce the Champions Table and the presentation of the work of the Tri-Regional Homeless and Poverty Initiative. Stony Plain is proud to sit on the Champions Table as it addresses some of the regional aspects needed to advance Stony Plain's plan to reduce poverty. Last week, I presented a draft poverty reduction strategy and touched on our regional work with the Champions Table. Tonight, you will receive some more information on this work and our regional efforts to align poverty reduction strategies. At this point, I would like to introduce some of the Champion Table members. Tonight, we are joined by Brenda Horlack, a long-term resident of the Tri-Region, a current resident of Parkland County, and a member at large of the Champions Table. We are also joined by Brenda Johnson, also a long-term resident of the Tri-Region area and current resident of Stony Plain. She's also a member at large on the Champions Table. And Erin Rutherford, who works as a manager of social planning in the city of Spruce Grove, who is here tonight as a member of the Champions Table. Again, the Champions Table is a community-based collaboration working to align poverty and homeless work in the regional level. To start this evening, I will turn it over to Erin, one of the co-chairs of the Champions Table.
Thank you, Sherda. And before we begin, I just wanted to start with, we wanted to start with a land acknowledgement, considering reconciliation is a huge focus within the work of poverty and homelessness and changing that. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on traditional lands referred to as Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route for the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries, and that the Tri-region and all the people here are beneficiaries of the Peace and Friendship Treaty. We also acknowledge the historical and ongoing effects of colonialism by settlers on Indigenous communities, including intergenerational trauma as a result of stolen land, residential schools, the 60 Scoop, and persistent experiences of racism and discrimination in modern society. We dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and healing. Thank you. Before we begin, we wanted to talk a little bit about the history and how we came to be the Tri-Regional Homeless and Poverty Initiative. And so one of the things I felt was really important to start with is the principles that guided this work from the start. And there was many principles, but a few that I felt were really important to highlight today included that, you know, we really wanted to look at this as holistic and start to break down some of those boundaries, not just the boundaries within our municipal jurisdictions, but boundaries around distinct areas of health, social, education, economic, as well as boundaries around the type of sector that you're in. So public, private, nonprofit, and start to break some of those down. So a huge principle that we went into this with was that idea of holism. Then we also want to really highlight that this is meant to be long-term. Complex problems need sustained and committed effort to build collaboration and trust over time and to establish sustainability. So we're in this for the long haul, and we knew that going in from the beginning. And the last one, and you'll see it a lot tonight in our presentation, is that the process we went through is both about the process and really making sure that we have consensus building and shared understanding, but it is also about outcomes. So we're matching the process of finding those common grounds with what are we going to do, what is coming out of that. So those were some of the principles that really focused our starting point for the Tri-Regional Homelessness and Poverty Initiative. So the Champions Table itself was the first element of the Regional Homelessness Initiative that was convened in September 2019. So it was first actually formalized with the established roles and membership in March of 2020. So what we did between the 2019 September and March was we really worked to co-create with regional stakeholders on what that terms of reference would be and what would be our common language, why is this work important to us? And then from there, we had our first term in March 2020. The Champions Table acts as a steering committee for the overall initiative, and members of the Champions Table are composed of 15 members, including a mix of leadership from various sectors, individuals with lived or living experience, and members of the public. Selection is based on the individual's capacity, interest, passion, and understanding that we have that diversity, sectoral representation, and regional representation. Organizational representatives are leaders within their area so that they can make those decisions representing their organization. And now I would like to hand it over to Brenda to talk about the next slide.
Thank you, Annie. Early in the presentation, we identified why collective work is important. What is our vision, the fire in our bellies, and what are our intentions? We also knew our work needed to be what the Tri-Region community could embrace. We accomplished this through a series of workshops, presentations, and dialogues with facilitation through a consulting group. We identified why collective work is important, and through this process, the key stakes in our work was born. We believe in safe and secure places for all. We believe people are good. We have resources and are willing to invest the time to ensure the community understands and can share this information knowing a difference is being made. We are compelled to do this work because it takes a community of people working together to make a difference. It takes a community to raise a child. It takes a community to look after community. And for this, we are stronger together. We can imagine the future of eliminating poverty and homelessness by ensuring provisions are there for all that want it. We can imagine the community is working together and those that want to succeed have a path. Brenda Johnson will now lead you through what we affirm to be our common definitions.
Thank you, Brenda. When we speak to common definitions, we identified that there is no consistent definition or measurement within Canada that is utilized for poverty or homelessness. So one of the first goals was co-creating and agreed upon definitions of poverty and homelessness for the Tri-Region and the work of this initiative. This is important in collaborative work to ensure consistent understanding and communication as a collective. Poverty is not isolated to an individual or physical situation, so the definitions agreed upon were multidimensional and beyond traditional economic factors. So homelessness and poverty has a range. The common definitions the Champions Table affirmed are what you read on this slide: economic poverty, social poverty, cultural poverty, and homelessness. When addressing these definitions to the Tri-Region, the Champions Table then identified the regional challenges. So when we talk about tri-regional challenges, one of the key elements of the work of the Champions Table is to look for system-level changes and challenges. Collectively, 3 key themes emerged around current system challenges to address poverty and homelessness in the Tri-Regions. So the systems are not working. We are not isolated with this issue. It is a North American challenge, perhaps even a global challenge. All systems can improve. The intent of this theme is to identify that as a focus, changing the way we work together is needed to address poverty and homelessness. Systems are definitely under pressure. Organizations are protective of their work and funding, and rightfully so, with government cutbacks and having to do so much more with less. And then the system paradigms need to change. The focus is we need to change the way we think about and address the issues that are holding poverty and homelessness in place, by defining the system, identifying unconscious biases, and what the process is for that change. So Brenda Harlick will now walk you through what we are doing.
Thank you, Brenda. Once we determined our key stakes, common language, and our purpose and identity as the Champions Table, our attention shifted to developing a common agenda which collectively identified what are we doing, how we are doing it, and how do we know we are making a difference. This common agenda acts as an action plan and guide for our future focuses. What are we doing? We are changing the systems that hold poverty and homelessness in place. We are bringing our efforts together to provide opportunities to achieve impact. Poverty and homelessness have cascading impacts which intersect with other issues. Traditional ways we perceive problems related to poverty and homelessness are changing. This will require us to foster and cultivate great individuals, community, and organizations in their perceptions and understanding of these issues and challenges. This work with the many challenges and issues identified impacts the community as a whole. Everyone is touched by this. Brenda Johnson will move forward now explaining how we are doing it.
What are we doing? So these are the actions we are focused on for 2021 and beyond. We're learning by engaging in research projects, data collection, and report dissemination. We're going to be able to keep our focus by getting lived experience at the table through the initiation of the First Voice Advisory Group, which will be initiated in 2021 this year. We'd like to see shifting perspectives through communication, public education, and public engagement. The communication tool on this will share information about the work and this initiative with the broader community. The advocacy work that will be done by being unified in our voices, gathering and using that data to understand the tri-region issues to support this. The bridging portion by creating opportunities for engagement and collection of input from groups through surveys and personal connections to support change. We'll be promoting through the grounding the work in a rights-based approach. And initiate, so ideally the first working group that will be established is housing and supports, and shelter being the operative word. And going forward, how will we know, or how do we know we're making a difference? So we will be creating logic models, and we will identify shared outcome measures of poverty and homelessness for the tri-region. We will collect qualitative and quantitative data and share that data. This will also be the focus for the Champions Table work in 2021. I'm going to pass it along to Erin now, who will provide a picture and explanation of the long-term vision for the initiative.
Thank you, Brenda. So, we've talked a lot, but I think it's really important to have a visual to show you what we're building out over time. So this is a visual representation of the initiative in its whole and all the components that would be going into it. So the first component that's built out right now and is getting stronger every year is the Champions Table. As Brenda mentioned, we are looking to build out the First Voice Advisory Group, which is intended to be an informal group that allows individuals with lived or living experience to participate at the level that works for them. So it could be they would like involvement in the Champions Table or one of the working groups, and we want to support them for that involvement. Or it could be that they just want to go for a coffee and tell us about their experiences, and we want to create an opportunity for any spectrum of involvement. We also prioritize the tables that we are going to be initiating because they do require resources and capacity. So the first working group that would be built out off of the Champions Table is housing and support. So this looks at your social service provisions for people experiencing poverty and homelessness, as well as housing across the region as well, and making sure we have supportive housing. Healthy living is a catch-all for many things, but it's really about ensuring that people experiencing poverty and homelessness have opportunities to thrive through access to public transportation, access to recreation, access to education opportunities to improve their circumstances and conditions. So that's what the Healthy Living Working Table focuses on. Community inclusion and capacity building is about leveraging the strengths that already exist in the tri-region and ensuring that we create spaces where all members of our community feel like they can play a role in addressing poverty and homelessness, and then also that those experiencing poverty and homelessness feel like they have a space in the community as well. And finally, a table on reconciliation. While reconciliation is something we want to, as a principle, feed into all areas, it does also need focused attention and work, especially around the links with poverty and homelessness and some historical trauma, which I mentioned in the land acknowledgement. So we also want to focus on working with our partners on reconciliation specific to poverty and homelessness. Thank you.
It's Brenda Harlock. Throughout this presentation, you have seen the brand identity of Hope and Home, and we are very excited to take you on a very small journey of how it came about and the why. After an RFQ process, Hello Public was selected. The design process began with investigating other organizations with a focus on homelessness and poverty. While cliches are cliches because they are true, we wanted to be more deliberate and thoughtful in our approach. We focused on states of being and messages of hope, direction, guidance, journey, encouragement, energize, advocate, positivity, and light. With this concept in mind, we sought to create a visual identity which is truly unique within the area of homelessness and poverty, yet appropriate. Keeping the lights on, we often hear that phrase when discussing poverty and homelessness. We may even grow this and say, let's turn the lights on. It is intended to represent the warmth and safety of light, which is a concept people can relate to, whether they have to choose between keeping the lights on or putting food on the table. For those that are homeless, it represents the comfort and safety of shelter. And when those two needs may be met, there is hope. We have adopted a universal color palette as hopelessness does not discriminate. The colors are friendly, bright, and optimistic. The combination is incredibly hopeful and friendly and appeals to the masses. We wanted it to be original, yet for people to understand. We wanted to create an emotion within the viewer when looking at the logo, its designs and colors, basically to feel the light and spark their emotions. We feel hope is a word that everyone can relate to in their own way. The Hope Studies Foundation from the U of A defines it beautifully. Hope is a process of anticipation that involves the interaction of thinking, acting, feeling, and relating, and is directed towards a future fulfillment that is personally meaningful. In closing, I would like to share a quote that captures hope and home. Hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from a fight. Hope is that thing inside us that insists, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it, work for it, and a fight for it. Barack Obama. On behalf of the entire Champions table, thank you.
Thank you much, Brenda and Aaron for that presentation. That was actually very informative and a great agenda item that was put into the package for us. Definitely, I love the home and house, the Hope and Home logo. It's a great design and it does do exactly what you just mentioned of bringing some light and some hope and some kind of energy back to our communities of trying to strengthen our overall community. I think I like the way that you guys put it, that it's very interconnected in terms of economic poverty, social poverty, cultural poverty, and homelessness. They're so intertwined that we really need to kind of slowly unthread each thread so that we can address the root of each and every problem so that we can build a more resilient community. Members of council, please text me if you want to speak and ask questions. Okay, moving on, we have Councillor Bennett. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to the Champions Table. Champions Table, welcome to our council meeting is what I meant. I think the work you're doing is an amazingly important aspect of our community. My question is, when it comes to getting this message out and the implementation of any kind of plan, what are the first steps? How are you planning a media campaign or just getting the word out? Do you have any concrete ideas, and when will that start to happen?
Councillor Bennett, it's Brenda Johnson here. I'd be happy to at least attempt some answers for you. We've been working on this project for 18 months now, and I think our goal initially is to inform all the 3 councils in the region as to where we are right now. Now the hard work begins. So as we start to strike our working groups, and the first one being our First Voice Advisory Group, that will set the stage for how we're going to roll this information out to the public. Yes, we will. We've talked about using social media. We've talked about using the Hope and Home through different levels of media. But I think what we need to understand first is that we have the municipal region's support in really doing the work that we've laid out in front of you tonight. And Aaron, I'm wondering if you want to weigh in a little bit on this.
You did a great job, Brenda. I would just add that we have a plan to also engage with other stakeholders through the journey in 2021, because part of systems thinking is becoming less and less wrong. And as the Champions Table, we recognize we have a lot of knowledge and collective knowledge, but we also have gaps in our knowledge. So part of our communication will also be linked with engagement, would be the piece that I would add.
Thank you, Aaron. Did that answer your question, Councillor Bennett?
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yes, it does. Thanks, you guys. Great job.
Thank you very much with that. And just wanted to just add to that question. One of the things that we learned through the Mayor's Task Force on COVID-19 and just through community resiliency was that even though there's such great things that are going on in our community in terms of the social services side, not many people understand what they are and how to access them. Do you guys have a strategy of how to do that besides using social media? Because we know that that's only will attract only a certain percentage of a population and not get maybe to the people that really need it.
Mayor Choi, Brenda Johnson again here, and I'll ask you know, Erin and Brenda Howerluck to weigh in too. We're following a process of learning because it's the Champions Table is in learning mode themselves to understand poverty and homelessness, and we're using an institute, the Tamarack Institute, that actually is helping us understand collective impact and what that means moving forward. The Institute actually has programming on collective impact, community engagement, collaborative leadership, community innovation, and evaluating impact. And I think as we move forward in the next 6 to 8 months, the strategy will start to initialize, and we're hoping a goal of the Champions Table is hopefully by the end of 2021, we will have a strategy in place. Erin and Brenda?
Yeah, I would just like to add to that and say, right now, where we are in the process, we are still in our infancy in terms of that collective impact work. And so the Champions Table, or what we have established thus far, won't be providing any direct services to the community. The working tables that we establish may be, and that's something that will be determined over time. But right now, the Champions Table is meant to be really that community building, capacity building. And so the knowledge has to get out about that so we can have strong feedback loops and we can have awareness of this work that is happening regionally to address poverty and homelessness. And the communication is very different, in my opinion, than, you know, if we're trying to promote specific services to community residents. It's more, I would say, an engagement campaign at this point than communication on service delivery.
Thank you very much for that, Erin and Brenda. The next question goes to Councillor Matties. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is with regards to, you know, the different causes of poverty and homelessness. I mean, there's obviously a number of reasons, whether that is related to alcohol, drug addiction, mental health issues, or if it's an individual who has fallen down, whether that's through technology displacement and having to raise a family, etc. Do you have any examples anywhere in the world of successful programs that have been able to address, and obviously there's different paths for these two groups, but effectively reduce poverty and you know, in a program that maybe we can utilize?
Linda, excuse me, Councillor Matties. We're definitely, you know, in the process of looking to that. I mean, we do know that there are programs out there, but successfully coming to terms with poverty and homelessness is very unique to each region. So I'm going to toss this over to Erin again, because I know we're starting to accumulate a little bit of data that was available to us. But the goal for 2021 is to actually do just as you asked and find those examples out in the globe.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Councillor Matties. We absolutely have examples of great work done across Canada, even in our own province and internationally, that we have and will continue to lean on in terms of practices. The reality, though, is that these issues are complex, And so what we have to be able to do is take that great work of other areas and overlay it to what is the context of our current situation. And having worked in the Tri-Region now for 2 years, I know that the structures that we have in place are very unique in terms of how the Tri-Region is composed. Like, for example, looking on Ontario, they have social service is a provincial thing, so they have regional social service provision. So it's very different. We can't just take something that's been done there and overlay it here because it won't work. That being said, what I would say is we are absolutely looking at in terms of how people have measured poverty reduction, how people have identified where they've made those gains and how they're recording that and reporting it back, because it's so hard to contribute our work to change if we don't have that strong data to inform us. So that's why 2021 is really focusing on what is our baseline as a region? What are those shared measures that we agree to? Because, you know, with the example of poverty, and we've created a definition now, but even in terms of measures, there's low income measure, there's market basket measure, there's multiple measures that are used to identify poverty within Canada, let alone the world. And so we have to determine as a region which one we want to use to create that baseline so that we can actually start to assess the difference we're making over time. Did that answer your question, Councillor Matisse?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And move on to the next question. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to our presenters. So some of my questions have been answered, but just going to our common definitions. So kind of putting together your guys' report and the idea that our system paradigms need to change. I'm looking, I can easily wrap my head around, you know, economic poverty and homelessness, and certainly I can appreciate the social poverty aspect. I struggle to kind of, when I read the cultural poverty definition, I read people lack meaning in their lives or connections to a community that sustains them. Now, the second half of that, I would kind of argue is like a social poverty thing, but help me to understand, because when I read this, I go, people lack meaning in their lives. Is it are we attempting to fill this meaning in people's lives? I mean, in my opinion, that's a pretty tall order. So maybe if you had sort of a concrete example of what we are looking at when we say that, or how would we address that, I could wrap my head around what we're talking about there.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Brenda Johnson here again. When we're talking about the common definitions, believe me, it was a thorough process going through this with the 15 members at the table with some facilitation. Do we propose that we could solve all of these issues? No, but what we did identify is that any kind of poverty in any four of these areas, it lends to the hope and home graphic and creation that we support, because what we find, and when we're talking to some people, and we'll affirm this going forward as we get our First Voice advisory table together, but it's been identified that without the hope, poverty seems to define itself for people because they give up, right? So when we're talking these four different areas, and Aaron and Brenda, please weigh in on this. I'm finding it very difficult to talk without seeing a face, so.
Brenda, did you want to talk, or do you want me to jump in? Brenda H.
Go ahead, Aaron. I have a few thoughts too, but go ahead.
Thanks, Brenda. So thank you, Councillor Meyer, for that great comment. And you know what? It is meant to be, this is a part of that paradigms changing, is that we don't often think about the cultural dimension of poverty. Culture in this case is identifying with a group and having that connection. So whether that is a church-based group, or whether it's your, for First Nation community, are you connected to your home community if you live off reserve? Do you have that connection with elders, with people? So the cultural poverty is really what we know, that when people lack that, when they feel like their life is meaningless, or when they feel like they don't have any community to be a part of, or don't feel connected to a community and a culture, that's when a lot of the pathways into poverty and homelessness are actually seen, like addictions and mental health that were mentioned by another counselor, issues, right? So it's a really important piece in the dialogue that we had as a champions table around really understanding that it is multidimensional, and that people can have areas where they can be really struggling if they do not have these needs, their cultural needs, their social needs, and their economic needs met. So that was the holistic approach we were taking in this definition. Brenda?
Couldn't have said it better. No, that's exactly what I was going to be referring to, as well as we are finding out right now with COVID-19, having this sense of belonging, or just even having that attachment to someone, aside from a hug and a smile. It's very important when people are experiencing hopelessness, is that, when you belong to a group, which is larger than 2 or even more than 20, it raises hope in them. So I just echo everything that Aaron and Brenda have said about how important the cultural poverty definition is to this group.
Thank you very much. Councilor Myers, does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, it shed actually a fair amount of light on it for me. If I could just follow up. So just to actually not so much a follow-up, just a sort of continuation. So I can wrap my head around it a lot better. I'd be curious, I mean, I guess we're at the early stages, so looking for concrete, answers here might be sort of beyond this stage of the thing. So when you say, yes, I greatly appreciate, our connections to our community and for Indigenous to their elders and all the rest of this. My question is, how, and like I say, this might be a little early, how do we, I mean, are we just going to direct people, hey, you should have a community, or are we going to be looking to fill that community? So I guess that's I'm getting ahead of the game, really.
May I, Councillor Mayor? Is it Aaron or Brenda? Did you want to?
No, you go ahead, Aaron. No.
I think that's a really great point. And at this point in the process, really, we needed to do a lot of legwork as the champions table in getting some regional consensus, at least within our group. And these are meant to evolve over time as we have more involvement of, like, we might involve lived and living experience, and they might say these are ridiculous. And we have to talk about that and assess that. But at the end of the day, right now, we're definitely not looking for the municipalities or the champions table or this initiative to fill that cultural void, but to create the conditions where people have opportunities to connect with the communities that they want to reach out to and be a part of, and to foster that. So for the cultural poverty, it's more about what conditions do we create around inclusion and sense of community and belonging. And those are the conversations we would have around that. We wouldn't be seeking to be that community for an individual. If that answers your question, Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, I thank you very much for your answers.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anybody else that has texted in that they would like to speak. So again, on behalf of council and our residents, and definitely the whole entire Tri community, thank you for the work that you ladies are doing with this project and at the champions table. It will take a concerted effort with all three municipalities to continue to make our communities better for everyone. I don't think we'll ever be able to solve it in our lifetime, but we'll definitely make it better. So thank you very much. Any last comments from the presenters?
No, just thank you for the opportunity, Mayor Choi and Council. This was definitely intended to be to provide information as to where the Champions Table is now and where we propose to go in the future. So we thank you for your time and the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much. And you ladies have a great evening. I look forward to following the progress of the entire Hope and Home coming through, and to see what kind of strategy is at the end of 2021.
Thank you very much and good night.
Okay, members of the council, that ends our presentations delegation. Moving on to number 5, which is business items. We have 2 items tonight. 5.1 is the Somerville Gate Development Update for February of 2021. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Tom Golden, CAO here. I will just turn over and ask our General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure to speak further to this matter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a few brief comments. I don't intend to read the lead sheet entirely. It's there. I'm sure you've reviewed it already. The purpose tonight is to give Council an update on the Somerville Gate development. We were last provided an update in June of last year. We have been working with the 2 ownership groups. In particular, on May 14th, a formal submission was submitted by Cron Engineering Limited on behalf of both ownerships on the next steps that were going to be undertaken to remediate the site and to bring it forward towards occupancy. There was quite a number of details provided, which some of them are listed in the lead sheet. During the summer and fall, the ownership groups did proceed with some surface and cosmetic repairs on the site. Some geotechnical work was completed. The town has been working through those reports and has asked for more information on their plans for next year. So at this time, it is believed that the ownership groups will continue with the testing, the remediation, and the corrective actions necessary to allow the project to move forward. The 2 guiding principles that the town is working with is the building structures must be safe and suitable to occupy, and that the town's risk is mitigated. I am joined tonight by the Manager of Planning, who has a lot of the details involved in the review of these documents. I will ask Mr. Dibble if he has any comments to what you would like to supplement, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Again, Miles Dibble, Manager of Planning Development here. There's not too much more to add. I think the report kind of speaks for itself. I guess I'd just sum it up by there's some of the remedial things in their reports from the fall that were indicated they need to be done in the spring. So we're basically just looking forward to getting some of the additional materials, report studies, and then doing some inspections to ensure the work is done properly. Thank you.
Thank you much. Members of council, any questions for administrative staff? Councilor Matties, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is related to page 25, where it talks about there'll be additional costs to inspect and monitor the remediation and that they're unknown. I'm guess asking if there's an estimate or a possible estimate of those costs. And then secondly, when do you expect this work to be completed as it's going to start again in the spring?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Matties. So we do not have an estimate of any additional cost at this time. The administration does have a small budget for some miscellaneous consulting work, in particular for expertise such as this, which would be required in this case. So at this time, we're not, we don't have an estimate and we don't have a request for additional funding. We will work within our current budget as we know it today. The second question had to do about the timing. We are understanding that the work would begin in the spring, so typically that would be in around the May-June timeframe. And when it would be completed, it's not clear to us. There is some concrete work that needs to be removed and investigations that need to take place. I guess all we can say is that we're understanding that the project is looking to move forward next year, so we're assuming it will be done in the summertime for us to be inspected after it's completed.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Manning, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
I stand nobody else has texted in, so maybe I'll ask my question. So the question is, this lays out some timelines of what needs to happen. What happens if these timelines are not met? At some point, do we initiate another process?
Your Worship, thank you for the question. Another process is under consideration. As of May, it will have been 1 year since we reopened the current permit process, and our expectation is that we see activity within the first year. So we will be having conversations with the ownership groups regarding their commitments from last year, which are now coming into finishing up a year one. What that other process would look like is undetermined at this time, but we will definitely keep council apprised as we move forward with more information and further updates.
Thank you. Next question goes to Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess more of a comment at this point, because your question kind of touched on it, and that was, exactly to the general manager's point. We know that this has been going on a long time, and at some point in time, I would expect to see the other options that we can explore in respect to this development and the continued seemingly missing of deadlines and of commitment dates. So to the general manager, I hope when we receive our next update on this that we might have a bit of a better picture as to what some of those options might be and the different roadmaps that council might have to explore in respect to this. So just those comments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Moving on to Councillor Meyer. Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just a clarification. I'm looking on page 24, and some of the agreed upon details and submission included in the following, and at the very bottom, it speaks of exposing perimeter garage piles and also the removal of garage concrete. And then in our next paragraph, it speaks about some administration observed driveways being poured prior to. I'm just curious, because it sounds not on the up and up to me, and I was just hoping if admin could kind of clarify what's going on there for me, so I have the right impression.
Thank you.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Meyer, thank you for the question. That is a question that we did ask ourselves, was why the driveways would be poured when potentially there would be other work in and around them that needed to be completed. It appears the ownership group felt that some of the more cosmetic things around the site were important to take care of, and it does not change the fact that we're still concerned about some of the foundations and some of the concrete works, and so we are following up with them on that and continue to press them on that point.
Well, thank you. So even with that work done, if it needs to be removed because it doesn't meet building standards, then that is done at their cost or at our cost?
Your Worship, yes, it is done at the developer's cost.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Meyer, anything else?
No, thank you.
Any other questions to administration?
Your Worship, it's CAO here. Just briefly and quickly, Your Worship, it was the intent that as we move into the construction season, that we provide periodic updates moving through 21. I would expect, probably every 2 months, so to speak, from here for the remainder of the year, or unless something drastically changes or specifically changes and we need further direction from council.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Plechko just messaged in. So go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through to administration. I'm just wondering, with the lessons that we learned in the back development that we has been demolished at this point in time, if any of the building aspects that were noted in the back there have been also noted in the front, and what we're doing to mitigate that so that we can move through the process fairly quickly with what's going on in the development today.
Thank you.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Plechko, we are well aware of the conditions at the back unit, the back area there, which was demolished. I guess what I could say at this time is that the gate area does have different soils, different compactions, different construction, albeit by the same contractors, etc. But we are cognizant of the differences and the similarities, put it that way, and are working through to ensure that the town's interests are protected and the risk is mitigated. So we are drawing the connections as appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Plechko, anything else?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a little bit further to that, when you talk about the town's interests being mitigated and protected, are we somewhat thinking that potential buyers down the road, their risks are mitigated and a little bit too? Just some of the other developments that we've had in the past in town didn't or haven't in the past protected both, and I'm just wondering if there's a way to protect the interest of the individuals that may be purchasing or moving into those in the future.
Your Worship, it's CAO again, and I'll make a few comments along that, and then certainly if the General Manager wishes to add further supplement, that'd be great. Your Worship, and to Councillor Plechko and the rest of the council, I think that's exactly what we consider to be one of our basic principles here, if not our foundational principle, is to do everything that we are able to within legal ability to ensure the safety of those buildings moving into the future, whenever that may be. I think what's important, certainly in my perspective, as part of the lead sheet here for council, is that our engineering services, so to speak, as well as the engineering for both ownership groups, had agreed to essentially a path forward or a process to move forward to ensure that safety for all. And some of that has been done, some of it hasn't been done, and ultimately, we feel our best bet to achieve that safety for future residents, is to follow that agreement, as it's been agreed to by both parties. I'll stop there, Your Worship. Certainly, if the General Manager wishes to add further, I'd welcome him to.
Thank you.
Your Worship, just to supplement a tiny bit, there will be home warranty on the buildings when they are suitable for occupancy. So that is one other layer of protection that the potential buyers will have as well.
Okay, I just want to add on to the Councillor Plechko's question then, because we've had a few issues regarding development. So what is the town's responsibility? I think, from what I've read and what I've seen is to make sure that the properties are built to a Alberta Building Code standard. But what about the quality of the workmanship? Does the town's plan have to monitor that as well? Or is that part of our due diligence, or is that something that we do not need to do?
Your Worship, thank you for the question. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't be able to answer this the way a lawyer would likely. But I guess I am aware that through the safety codes and the authorities that the town has, that when we're aware of things, we have an obligation and a duty to take care of those things, however we feel is appropriate. So if we're aware of various deficiencies or various what I'd call substandard or inadequate building techniques or consequences of such, then we have a duty to act and to protect the public in that regard. So that's how I would answer that. So in this case, we are aware of some things we're concerned about, so we have an obligation to see that through.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, because then that's probably one of the reasons I think a lot of people ask us, why is it taking so long to get some kind of development happening at Somerville, or what's going on there? And the fact is that our staff are following Alberta building codes and safety codes to make sure that the product that is being built there is safe and for our residents of today and tomorrow. Councillor Marr, you had a question. Go ahead.
Actually, it's been answered, so it's not necessary. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask Councillor Plechko to make the motion, please, to accept for information.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That Town Council accept the Somerville Gate development update for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Plechko. Members of Council, any other questions and comments regarding this? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, there's 7 hands in favor.
Thank you very much for going, Secretary. And that is passed. Moving on to 5.2 is the 2020 annual development activity. Go ahead, administration.
Again, thank you, Your Worship. I will just ask our General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure to speak to this. I know we have staff present that may be able to speak to it as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I will hand this over to Mr. Dibble, the Manager of Planning. This is a new report that we've prepared to summarize the activities and the development area for the whole year. And so Mr. Dibble has a short presentation to highlight some of the data and provide some context to what it means.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Again, Miles Dibble, Manager of Planning and Development. So yes, indicated, this is the first annual development activity report. We did a little bit of an examination for other municipalities, just kind of see what's out there, and thought that it would be a good idea. Most years we do receive a variety of inquiries regarding our development activity in town, and this is our attempt to make it a little more easier to understand. So again, this document presents a review of growth trends focusing on development activity in 2020. The numbers are from previous years, and they're provided for comparison and kind of show an average over time. You can see here on the right, the population of Stony Plain has steadily rose over the last 20 to 30 years. And again, this report here is to monitor community growth and present updates to both council and our stakeholders, as well as the general public, to display information in new ways, featuring graphs, tables, and maps. In the past, most of the information has been limited just to tabular format, and offer novel comparisons and a wider range of content. So typically it was just building permits and development permits. and we have some new information in here. So for example, at the beginning of 2020, we formalized our pre-application inquiry process. And we did this to ensure that land development applications are complete and that all required information for the application to be processed successfully has been provided by the applicant when we actually get the formal application. Also, this reduces the processing time for land development application and gives administration an idea about upcoming projects within the community, helping us to better resource and staff some of our levels for service. As you can see by the graph on the lower left, in this year we had a total of 26 different pre-applications, 15 under planning, 10 under development, and 1 under engineering. Getting to the bread and butter of typical information that we provide, development and building permits. So in 2020, a total of 435, much more than that, development and building permits were issued. It's a slight decrease from last year, and the value of these permits was $41.7 million, so a fairly large amount there. Of these, 160 permits were issued for new dwellings in 2020, which is a fairly stark increase from previous years, and compared to 2019 was over 44%. You can see from the graphic that we had 160 there, and in previous years, you know, especially the last 5, it's a 5-year record, so we were quite happy to see that. Just to kind of give it a little bit of a graphic in terms of where this is in town. 4 dwellings, over half of them were in the South Business Park, attributed mainly to a 84-unit apartment building, as well as the Sun Meadows area where there is 3 12-unit dwellings, as well as some single detached in there. And you can see both by the table and the map, the remaining roughly 30% were kind of spread between South Creek, West Terra, Genesis on the Lakes, Brickyard, and the Silverstone neighborhoods. In terms of the volume and value of these building permits, again, we previously disclosed some of the information here, but we just wanted to show you a trend in terms of the value of permits. So the value has been fluctuating, give or take, about 40 to 50,000. Again, so we're kind of in line for that. And if you see the bottom graphic here, you'll notice that the number of new constructions, which is the pale green, has actually been increasing, and we're on a 5-year high for that in terms of the volume. In terms of improvements, alterations, those sort of things, they have been going down slightly. But again, it's the new construction that we're often most interested in. 167 permits for the new construction and 180 for the improvements. And then the last area here is our gas, plumbing, electrical, and private sewage disposal system permits. 2 different graphics here, one displaying the overall amount and one showing the breakdown. So the breakdown is on the bottom left. As you can see here, there are 244 gas permits, 107 plumbing, 287 electrical, and 1 private sewage disposal system in 2020. Some of the values are about equal for the last 5 years. Some have gone down a little bit, but again, still a substantial amount. A total of 639 in total. So again, fairly similar to the last 3 years and slightly lower than the years before, but still a substantial amount that we process in a year. And if you really think about it, we're doing more than almost 2 a day at that rate. And then just in terms of the future, we hope this report paints a more comprehensive picture of how Stony Plain has and continues to develop and is more accessible and informative to our community than previous formats. We anticipate expanding the topics covered in the future. And again, thank you for listening. Here for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you much for the presentation, administration. And before I go to questions, I'll just ask my first question then. Went back to the previous slide about the graph about building developments, where new construction was at 167 versus the previous 5 years. So this is the highest new construction we've had in the last 5 years. And previous to that, we've had an economic recession in terms of what was happening in Alberta and our economy. And 2020 was kind of a weird year because we're faced with a pandemic and not a lot of ability to go out and do things, but yet we see 167 permits for new construction. Can administration shed some light on?
Your Worship, I'll start off and then I'll ask Mr. Dibble to supplement. I do know that the one large apartment building was in the queue before the pandemic, so that is one of the pieces of information. But we did see a significant uptick in new residential construction permitting in December and again into January. So I do believe there was some pent up demand for these types of offerings in the community, and there was a number of people who had saved their money and were willing to move forward with projects. Mr. Dibble, perhaps you want to supplement.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what my general manager indicated. There was a fairly substantial amount of kind of holding off, especially in the beginning of the year, but by the end, I think because a lot of things couldn't happen, a lot of individuals, I know that we did get a lot of alterations, decks, basement suites, that sort of thing. It seemed like a lot of people had additional time in their house and there was a lot of investment in properties at that time. And then, yeah, we did have a fair number of residential that I think in prior years it had kind of been held off. And just given that the construction industry was for the most part able to continue to work during the pandemic, as it turned out in 2020, many of those projects went forward with, I think the labor was available, more readily available than prior years as well. So just some things to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And moving to questions, Councillor Bennett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm referring, and I'm not sure what page it is, but to private sewage disposal system permits. Whenever I've seen those gas, plumbing, electrical, whenever I've seen those permit statistics before, I didn't clue into what private sewage disposal systems are. So, yeah, what exactly are those? That's my first question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. I'll get Mr. Dibble to answer this one. I think I could probably, but I don't want to take a chance, so I'll get Mr. Dibble to answer.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Bennett. Typically, private sewage disposal systems are things you'll find septic fields and similar disposal systems that are generally in a rural area, which is one reason why the town does not get a lot, but we do still have a substantial rural area along the urban or around the urban core. So we do get one or two a year often. You can kind of see here on the graphic, there is 0, 1, 2, 1, 1. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. So I'm thinking of some of the area that's a little bit north of the railroad tracks. I think it's 41st Avenue, up by the Heritage Park. Those houses have their own private sewer disposals. So when they want to connect to the town, that's what is included in that category?
No, I think when they connect, it's differently. This is, I would say, something like Rosenthal Estates. If this development happens there, then they are approved for private sewage disposal. If somebody is developing on 41st Street or 41st Avenue, then they will have to connect to our plumbing. So then it's not a private sewage, it is a common one. So the private one is, so the individual ones, which would be Rosenthal Estates and some of the larger acreages around our community.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That helps me a bit. My other question, to be honest, I was really surprised that the renovations and the renovation section wasn't way higher. As I go around town, I note a lot of houses that are looking newer, refreshed, and from some of my reading, I'm aware that that's kind of been a trend in 2020 with the pandemic, is that people are doing more renovations. So perhaps what I'm seeing people don't need permits for, if it's to say resurface the outside of their house. Would that need a permit?
Good questions.
Your worship, I'll get Mr. Dibble to explain what permits are necessary for what.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Through your worship to Councillor Bennett. Sidings generally wouldn't require, the replacement of siding would not require any sort of permit for, generally building permits are only required for structural work. In terms of development permits, it's often redevelopment of a site that would normally trigger something to that effect. Secondary suites, for example, would, anything that's a change of use, but typically cosmetics on the outside of a building or structure would not require a building or development permit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
That's good. That's a good question to ask, because I think a lot of our residents are not aware of that. So I'm glad to see that mostly just structural work needs a permit and other stuff do not. So, but I'm glad that you asked that question. If residents are concerned or don't have an idea if they need a permit or not, it's always best to contact our staff, and then they'll point them in the right direction. Councillor Mattis, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. My question is with regards to the charts and graphs. So I found that very interesting, and I really appreciate the information, but I'm wondering why we could not have 10-year ranges for all the graphs. Do we not have the information? Because it would be kind of nice to see, like, 10-year rolling. If we're doing it for some, why are we not doing it for all of them? Thank you.
Yeah.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Mattis, I'm assuming the answer to that is we have the data. However, it's just for the purposes of not cluttering too much data onto one graph. I would assume that's the answer.
Thank you.
If I may supplement, that is actually a very good point, through your worship to Councillor Mattis, and it was something that we did look at when we were developing these. And if you notice, even on the screen right now, the one that's just the general totals goes back for the whole decade, whereas the one that actually breaks it down is just 5 years. And as the general manager indicated, it was due to just the clutter of having too much information and graphics prepared. We wanted to keep it to relevant information, and for the most part, we kind of thought 5 to 10 years was a reasonable balance between too much and clutter and being explicit enough or thorough enough to be able to see and identify trends. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Mattis?
If I may follow up on that, and maybe I'm being a little picky here, but let's say, for example, we go to page 39, a volume of building and development permits by type. If we have the information, you would just narrow the bars. You'd be able to put 10 years in there. And it would be kind of nice to see what's happened over the last 10 years, value of all permits issued. I mean, I guess I understand the clutter aspect of it, but at the same time, if it's reasonable, it would be nice to have more consistency with regards to the 10 years. And that's just my thoughts. But thank you, though, for the good report.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your comments, Councillor Mattis. So I guess the idea is if it's going to be 5, be 5, so it's consistent, or if it's going to be 10, be 10, so it is consistent. So we're not moving back and forth from 5 years to 10 years, because it does add a little bit of confusion to that.
Yes, with the preferable of the longer would be better for me.
Yes. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, see nothing has come up. Councillor Meyer, I'm going to ask you to make the motion, please, to accept for information.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, that Town Council accept the, what is this report called? The annual development, the 2020 annual development activity report for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Members of Council, any questions or comments regarding this accept for information? See none, thank you very much, Administration, for providing this first annual development activity report. It is very informative, a lot better than the kind of the mismatch that we normally have in our quarterly reports. So this is a very, very inclusive and allows, as mentioned by Administration, Council and our stakeholders have a kind of a better idea of where the town is sitting. So thank you very much for that. I look forward to future years of reading this report. Members of Council, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I can see 7 hands in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. That's passed. So moving on is information items and council discussion. So members of council, anything that you'd like to bring up to council's attention or just to add to for comment? And I'll start with Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only observation that I had today was that the pickleball players were out at the outdoor tennis courts this afternoon. They are a hardy bunch and very determined to play their game.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Moving on to Councillor Lloyd. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I don't have anything, pardon me, to report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief item, although it's a sad one. It is with regret that I informed the community that the director of the Stony Plain Library, Alison Stewart, has submitted her resignation. She'll be joining her husband in Nova Scotia. So it's going to be hard to replace a gem of our community that truly has moved our community to new heights. And I'm sure whoever we find to replace her will do a good job, but her last day should be March 12th. And if anybody's out there listening and wishes to jump in there and see her before she goes, I strongly encourage it. So just that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to share a couple of things. First of all, I had attended the Bloom Education Series for elected officials, the first course out of a series of 10. It was excellent. Just a lot of very good information, and the overall series looks like it will be exceptionally good for any counselor, but especially for new counselors that join council, and give them a quick way to be able to really understand more about governance in municipalities. So I appreciated attending that, and very, very much enjoyed the presenters. Secondly, I just wanted to share that the Growth and Commerce Committee, we're going to be starting our business visitation program on February 4th, and this is our opportunity to get a better understanding of the goals and needs of the business community, but also how we can support the growth and resilience and our economic prosperity in our community. So looking forward to having good conversations with our business community. And finally, with regards to our Executive Director of the Greater Parkland Region Chamber of Commerce, Sarah Perry, she gave us a really good presentation of the challenges that businesses are facing right now and the economic realities of the current economic crisis. We talked about, the role of the chamber right now with regards to, and I guess, I guess it sums up by saying we can't be everything to everyone, otherwise you're nothing to no one. And so we asked her what were her primary roles, or what were the primary roles of the chamber. And she said, right, whether it's now or post-COVID or pre-COVID, it's being a valued resource to the community, as well as advocating for business. And she referred to a recent letter to the Premier outlining the critical needs of our businesses to reopen. And so it's very, very good that they're working on the advocacy for the businesses in our region. So I appreciate that. So that's all I have to report tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. Councillor Pletcher.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to also wish Allison the best in her future endeavors. She brought a lot to our community, to the library. She helped to get us a new library, and I'm sure she's leaving the library in very good hands. Big shoes to fill for the next individual, but I'm sure someone along the way will fill them shoes. And I wish her the best of all. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Pletcher. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two quick things. One, just wanted to have administration follow up. We did not receive an email answer in respect to my concern I raised at our last meeting from Westview Hospital and the STARS Air Ambulance landing pad and the ability for them to transport patients through that. So I just hope that we're just awaiting an answer on that. We'll see something shortly. Secondly, though, I just wanted to pass along some specific thanks and kudos to a few people. As we all know, we had the official launch of the RTSC last Thursday. We got the Government of Alberta stamp of approval to form the commission. And so it's been a very exciting last couple of days. Huge thank you to Council for all the support that you have put behind this fantastic initiative for not only our community, but the entire region. It's taken a lot of hard work from us to get here, and be a lot of hard work to continue to go forward as we move into operating mode by 2022. Special thanks to our video firm that the town uses. They participated in putting together the great launch video that we had. So again, a huge shout out to them for the quality work. Received some fantastic feedback and comments from the entire board and their representative councils on that video, as well as a special shout out to our IT department and our communications department for their work on the actual press conference. Virtual press conferences are not the easiest and prettiest thing in the world to do, but they helped it go off without a hitch. And so again, there was great appreciation expressed by the entire board and their representative councils, as well as a huge thank you to our entire administrative working team that's been a part of this file. It has been an incredibly heavy and in-depth project up to date. And so to take this next step in the legal formation of the commission and moving that forward to realizing regional transit in our community is incredibly exciting. And I look forward to the benefit that will have for not only Stony Plain, but the entire region in the future. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just a few comments here on my behalf. I've received quite a few messages and just thanks from members of our community about the South Creek Oval. Definitely residents have enjoyed it, and they were very appreciative that the town Stony Plain took the initiative to put an oval up, another skating oval, so it allows families to be able to access something that's outside with the physical distancing restrictions that we have as well. Maybe something to consider is maybe some lighting out there in terms of a portable light, but that's for us to kind of decide in the future, and hopefully administration can find something to enhance that as well. Also got a couple emails thanking us for the way that we're clearing the trails, especially that fact that we're on there fairly quickly after a snowfall, and it's accessible to many people in the community, so they're very thankful for that as well. And a special thanks to the crews that are doing a trail on, I think they said the corner of 779 and 628. I'm not too sure if council is aware, but there is supposed to be a trail connection there that was supposed to be put in by Alberta Transportation, but that didn't happen last year. But our crews have been going out there and actually still clearing a pathway there that would assume to be where the trail is, and residents have been able to access that corner to get across to Genesis on the lake. So thank you very much for administrative staff for doing that. Okay. And with that, thank you very much, administration, for the work, and definitely the presenters. Some great information for us as a council to kind of think about and kind of look forward towards us building a better and more resilient community. There's a lot of good information there that will help us as we provide this strategic direction for our community. Thank you, members of Council Administration, and that adjourns our meeting.